Welcome back to Money Talks with Mia Lee. I'm Mia. I'm an escort, stripper, CPA, and recovered banker. Every week, we'll talk about a new money topic that will steer you toward financial independence and wealth building. Today, we're going to talk about daily cash and income management. The challenges of inconsistent income that pertain to our industry might seem unique to our business, and some of them are, like arrangements and one-time large gifts from clients, but the majority of them aren't. For instance, the seasonality of our business, slow times and busy times, variable and fixed expenses. These are the same things that you would have to contend to if you, say, ran a restaurant. So if you ran a restaurant, you would also have busy seasons, you would have slow times. So maybe over the holidays when people are having company dinners and Christmas events and whatnot, you're going to be busier. And perhaps in August, when a lot of people are away on vacation, if you operate in a city like New York, where a lot of people leave the city in August, you might be a little bit slower. And so the same is true for our sex work businesses. Let's start by talking about the importance of daily cash tracking. So daily cash tracking doesn't mean that you have to write down every single day what you make. You could do this weekly, you could do it every 2 weeks. But even if you do your cash tracking weekly, you still want to write down what you made Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and so on and so forth, and the days that you didn't work. Now, you don't have to do this in an Excel spreadsheet like I do. I worked in finance for 12 years. Excel is very comfortable to me, but my work wife, for instance, uses a journal. She just writes down in her journal every single room she does at a club, every client she sees outside the club, how much they paid her, whether or not they tipped, if so, how much they tipped, the length of the room, the length of the booking, etc., etc. And this is a really good way for her to track not only what her income and expenses are, but also for her to understand who's tipping what and what's selling and what days of the week she tends to be busier. And then when she looks back on an entire year of data, she might be able to say, well, I'm much busier working in a club in November than I am in January, so maybe I want to work less in January than November. Another reason why it's important to track your income and expenses is because you want to understand profits, gross margin, and net income. So without getting too technical, I want to put some real world examples to these terms and numbers, and then it'll become self-evident why it's important to understand tracking your income and tracking your cash. So let's say I do a 1-hour booking and I charge my client $1,300 for it. I'm not making $1,300. Let's be very clear about that. First, I have to allocate my variable expenses. So my variable expenses are things that go up or down based on how many bookings I have or how many clients I see or how much time I spend with those clients. So one very obvious variable expense for me as an escort is condoms, right? If I don't see clients, I'm not using condoms. If I see more clients, I'm using more condoms. Sometimes if I see a client for a longer booking, I might go through more condoms. Another variable expense, if you're not working out of your home in-call, is hotels. So I currently have a home in-call, but 2 years ago, I was working out of hotels. So at that time, I didn't even offer 1-hour bookings. I had a 2-hour minimum at $2,500 because not only did I have to commute to the hotel, I also had to pay for the hotel. I also had to check in at the hotel and check out at the hotel. So once I factored in these variable expenses of the hotel plus the transportation costs to the hotel, I was immediately out about $300 to $400 just getting to the hotel and reserving the hotel. So it wouldn't have been worth it for me to do a $1,300 1-hour booking. I had to do a $2,500 2-hour minimum booking. Even if my client wasn't staying 2 hours, I had to have that minimum earnings threshold just to justify the variable expenses. So currently I mentioned that I work out of my home. I have a home in-call. For that, I pay an additional $3,000, give or take, for my second bedroom and my second bathroom, and that is my client in-call space and bathroom. So let's talk about hotels versus permanent in-calls. So one of the reasons you want to track your variable expenses is because you want to identify certain break-even points, meaning if a hotel costs you $300 each time you use a hotel, whether that's on day use or for an overnight booking, and let's say the comparable cost is, if you live in New York already, or if you have a Manhattan in-call, let's say the comparable cost is either an additional $3,000 on your rent or $3,000 a month for a designated in-call in New York City. $3,000 divided by $300 per hotel booking that's 10 bookings, right? So if on average, on a monthly basis, you have more than 10 bookings, that doesn't mean more than 10 clients, that doesn't mean more than 10 hours, but 10 individual bookings for which you would be paying $300 for a hotel, you might want to consider having an in-call. Other considerations of in-call versus hotel are, my in-call is in my home. I don't have any transportation time. I also don't have to check in and check out of the hotel. I don't have any risks of working out of the hotel, but I do have the risks of working out of my home. So there are some financial and non-financial considerations here. I have a little bit less privacy because I work out of my home, but I also have the convenience of not having to commute to a hotel. I might lose money on my in-call, so to speak, because maybe I have a lower volume of bookings in a month, or I have more out-calls than I have in-calls. But for me personally, on a financial and non-financial level, given my volume, the number of in-calls versus out-calls I have, the length of those bookings, I found it worth it to have my in-call in my home. When I add up the reduction of transit costs plus the entertainment value of having a really nice home in which to entertain clients for some of my longer dates, I decided that for me, it was worth it to have my in-call in my home as a second bedroom and a second bathroom. There are other considerations you might want to have in hotel versus home in-call or permanent in-call. You might not work every month out of the year. For me, I tend to work pretty consistently throughout the year. I take vacations, but otherwise, I generally work 12 or 11 months out of the year. So for me, having the fixed cost of an in-call makes sense. And I essentially am doing better than break even on the cost of hotel versus in-call. So I'll give another tangible example of a Fly Me to You. So some people absolutely covet Fly Me to You's. They think these are the most amazing bookings ever. And on the face of it, it might seem amazing, but we're going to talk in a little bit about how that $10,000 Fly Me to You might not be as lucrative as you think it is. So let's start with this example. So I had a $10,000 Fly Me to You. It was 12 hours daytime booking, and it was in Dallas. So this might off the bat seem like a great deal, right? $10,000 in 12 hours, but you're not really working 12 hours, right? I have to fly to Dallas, and because it's a daytime booking, I had to either get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and fly into Dallas and hope that my plane lands on time to get me to this person's hotel at 11 a.m., or to play it safe like I did, I flew in the night before. So now I have a hotel for the morning before my booking, and I also have a hotel for the night of my booking because my booking ends at 11 p.m. and I couldn't find a flight to take me home at 11 p.m. And even if I could, that would have really disrupted my sleep schedule. So I stayed 2 nights in Dallas for my 1 12-hour daytime booking. Now, flying from New York to Dallas, so door to door, from transportation time, from leaving my apartment to when I touch down in Dallas and get to my client's hotel, that's about 6 hours, right? It's a 3.5 hour flight, and then I have to get to the airport and from the airport, and then I have to get from the airport to my hotel, and then I have to get from my hotel to my client's hotel. So we're not even counting the dead time. So even though this $10,000 seems like it's a really great deal, I'm actually only making $10,000 gross, not net, right? Because I haven't accounted for any expenses. That $10,000 is actually being allocated over essentially 36 hours because it's 2 nights and a full day. So off the bat, I'm not making what the hours of my booking would dictate I'm making. So then let's talk about expenses. So I've got variable expenses of my flight, plus my Ubers, plus my 2 hotel nights. So immediately I'm out another $1,500, and that's if I fly economy, which I don't. So automatically, I'm only making $8,500 before I allocate any of my fixed expenses. And I'm making that $8,500 over 36 hours. So maybe Fly Me to You's are not looking quite as lucrative as we think they are. Now let's talk about our fixed expenses. So fixed expenses are things that don't move up or down based on how much business you get. So we're talking about things like advertising costs, things like photography. I have a publicist. I pay my publicist monthly no matter how many bookings that gets me or doesn't get me. So let's put some numbers to this example. Now, let's say you made $300,000 in the year, and then you had variable expenses of $60,000 for the year. So variable expenses, as a reminder, are things like hotels and condoms that go up and down based on how much business we do. And now let's say you had another $20,000 in fixed expenses, like photographer, your advertising expenses, maybe you had an assistant. So you had $300,000 in revenue from clients, and then you had another $90,000 in expenses, both fixed and variable. We know from this that you have a 30% expense ratio for both fixed and variable expenses. So that means that you're only taking home before taxes 70% of every dollar a client pays you. And that's really important to note because some of us have made the mistake of making, say, $10,000 on a Fly Me to You and thinking that's so much money. And yes, it is so much money, but it's not as much money as you think. Another thing I want to note is that fixed expenses, you typically want to allocate either quarterly, twice a year, or annually, because it's going to be really hard for you to divide up how much of every photo shoot you allocate to every booking just based on the number of bookings. Like, you probably want to do that on a per annum basis, meaning annually, because that's probably how you count those fixed expenses, right? Like advertising and photography and your assistant, or if you have a publicist. Once you know in this example that, say, you're making $300,000 gross and then you have expenses of $90,000 and you're taking home about 70 cents on every dollar that you are making from clients, you also want to consider how much time you're investing in making that 70 cents on the dollar of your $300,000, right? So this might seem like a lot of money, especially before taxes, which we'll talk about taxes in another episode, but you want to realize how much time you're putting into making that 70 cents on your $300,000. 70% of $300,000 is $210,000 a year. So you're netting $210,000 a year before taxes. Now, how many hours are you working for that $210,000? I guarantee you it's not the number of hours you spent with clients, right? So let's just take the hotel and Fly Me to You example, and we're not even including photography time, admin time, social media time. So the reason I used to only do 2-hour minimum bookings back when I had to commute to a hotel is because it would take me at least a half an hour to get to and from that hotel, never mind the check-in, check-out process, right? So once we factor in check-in and check-out, I'm probably putting in a good 45 minutes to 1 hour on each end. And that's factoring in the fact that I don't do makeup, I don't do my hair, I don't do any of those things. Most of you probably do. I've had a lot of plastic surgery, which is money, but not time. When we look at, say, a 2-hour booking in my example for $2,500, right? If I'm using a hotel, I'm probably spending 5 hours total on that booking, and that's with no hair or makeup time, because I just need to get to the hotel, check in, and check out of the hotel and pack up all my stuff and leave, and then get home. So really, I'm making $2,500 less the $500 for hotel and Ubers, so I'm making $2,000 on a 2-hour booking, but I'm making it over 5 hours, not 2 hours. And that's without allocating a penny of fixed expenses such as advertising or publicity or photography. So none of us are making anywhere close to the amount of money that clients are giving us. And that's a really important lesson that we need to take home, and we need to really look at our businesses and look at the profitability of every segment of our business. So another great example is my online earnings. If I spend 1 hour a month on my OnlyFans, I make approximately $1,500 a month. If I spend 40 hours a month on my OnlyFans, I make $18,000 a month. So the marginal payoff of me spending more than 1 hour a month on my OnlyFans is not very good, so I just don't do it. But I'll take my $1,500 for my 1 hour of work on OnlyFans. I'm Mia Lee. You can take the girl off Wall Street, but you can't take the banker out of the whore. Thank you so much for listening to my money talk. Please drop your questions and comments and suggestions for future episodes below.